and welcome to the SciFirst MovieTalk episode. So in this episode, I'll be discussing the 1947 festive classic Miracle on 34th Street, as directed by George Seaton. Before I start, I just want to give out another big shout out to Trent Martin, who requested this review via my Facebook page, and for his support once again. He's been a long-time supporter of the channel. Many thanks for your suggestion, Trent. Another absolutely excellent pick. And for anybody else that's watching who may have a film that they would like me to review, I will only be too happy to take a stab at it. It might not always be the fastest, but I promise I will get round to it at some point, so do let me know. So, the movie. This takes place between Thanksgiving Day and Christmas Day in New York City, and kickstarts by introducing us to Kris Kringle, as played by Edmund Gwenn, a homely, soft-looking gent who believes he is the real Santa Claus. After finding his way to the 1946 Macy's Day Parade, he comes across Macy's intoxicated Santa and instantly is taken aback, berating the man in the process. Reluctantly, Kris agrees to step in for the actor who's, with those around him, including the parade's organiser, Doris Walker, as played by Maureen O'Hara, not realising who Kris actually is. In his element, Kris shines in the parade, of course he did. So much so that Doris offers him the prominent position of Store Santa at the Macy's flagship New York City department store on 34th Street, of course. Whilst there, he proceeds to ignore the sales manager's advice to push overstocked toys and instead send parents to basically other stores in the neighbourhood which kind of carry the items that their child seeks. As strange as this may actually seem, it's a hit, and so letters of support and appreciation for Macy's new sales technique come flooding in. Unfortunately, however, Chris's new role is kind of short-lived when he crosses paths with the store's psychological evaluator, Granville Sawyer, as played by Porter Hall, who, after being found out as a fraud by Kris, proceeds to plot to have Kris committed to a mental institution for his beliefs. A frenzy then ensues as Kris is taken to court to prove he is indeed Santa Claus, in what begins as kind of a mock of a trial. Much to everybody's amazement, however, his plight and the plucky and resolved nature of his attorney, Fred Gailey, as played by John Payne, captures New York's heart. So, this was indeed the very first time that I'd actually watched the original Miracle on 34th Street. And although I did actually have a colorised version of it, to be quite fair, I did opt for nostalgia and to see the film as it was originally intended, to watch the black and white version. I did find the movie to be fantastically heartwarming. I really did. And quite comical, all told. I wasn't expecting it to be quite as funny as it was. Okay, so, most of it was perhaps a bit kind of dry humour. Quite sarcastic at times, and really kind of understated within the dialogue itself. But I thought it was really cleverly done, and certain moments had me in fits of laughter. I love the way that the movie starts with Kris kind of going through the Macy's Day Parade, getting infuriated with their intoxicated quote-unquote Santa, Simpsons reference for you there. You could just imagine Santa himself getting quite upset with the way that he was kind of indeed being portrayed. And of course, to see the splendid Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade, which I believe was the actual 1946 parade, which was an utter treat. The movie also has a strong female lead in the form of O'Hara's character, being a divorced single mum, coping on her own, and holding down a prominent position with Macy's. And even having the respect of her colleagues, which was kind of a refreshing twist to see from the usual kind of damsel in distress scenario, kind of from this era that you usually get. However, This was kind of dampened somewhat by the fact that her beliefs were classified as incorrect. Ergo, as she didn't believe in Santa, fairy tales, or nonsense in general, and given that she was bringing up her child with these same beliefs, Susan Walker, as played by Natalie Wood, this was indeed seen as an issue that needed correcting. Still needed a meddling man, if you like, to set things straight. But nonetheless, this was, it was part of the overall story. And at the time, so I can kind of appreciate why they did actually go down this route. In fact, the film is very much about, as much about Doris and Susan's journey of discovery, belief, and letting go, as it is about Kris Kringle's journey against the system which deems him unfit just because he believes he is Santa. The movie also has a couple of other little quirks that brought a smile to my face along the way, such as the look of sheer horror on the store clerk's face when Kris sends the kids to the other stores. The look itself is insane, totally priceless. The clerk nearly had a heart attack. There's also a moment where we get to see Chris's employment card with Macy's, and indeed he's put down the reindeer as his next of kin. I'm not entirely sure what they were going to do in an emergency, but, hey, I suppose they would at least be able to get him to the hospital pretty quick. Hey, at least they could beat the traffic. It has just about the right amount of mystery as well, so that it could kind of go either way. Is he or isn't he Santa? Without the need for any kind of magic or sleight of hand, if you like. In one hand, we have the possibility of Kris simply being a kindly old gent who is indeed suffering from a mental illness, or putting on one fantastic act. He does indeed prove people right to some extent in this respect when he does threaten once to cane the intoxicated Santa at the start of the film, and indeed then when he does knock Sawyer on the head with his umbrella. Not quite the behaviour befitting of jolly old Saint Nick. But then there are instances when he's talking Dutch, when all around him seem to be infectious with his Christmas spirit, the joy that he then spreads to everybody around him, and the people that he manages to bring together. And so in this, I think that, the balance that the film gets is absolutely spot on. The film is really quite amusing overall, totally charming, and like I've said, exceedingly heartwarming. I did indeed find that the dialogue to be quite witty and fairly fast-paced, with a very clever plot that raised some very interesting questions as to what we all would perhaps believe in that same situation. I did find it interesting to actually read how the film was actually made this time around. Sort of less kind of Hollywood glam and more kind of shoot and run, with many of the scenes kind of being shot in the spur of the moment, or in only kind of one take, especially for those in the Macy's Day Parade and those in Macy's itself. And I think that this kind of adds a real sense of awe and realism to the feature that isn't often seen for films of its time. It doesn't try and glam everything up. And in fact, I would say that it's I did find it very akin to many British productions of the time. It certainly had that kind of edge to it. So overall, again, it is a very charming and very heartwarming movie, which has been very cleverly constructed. And I would even say it's a little ahead of its time, with certainly some of its concepts on consumerism and even the characters that it portrays. It is interesting how it uses the commercialisation of Christmas almost against itself, when the message, Kris is sending out in one department store starts to spread to other stores and other businesses across the country. How one man's ideals, generosity and commitment branched out across the nation. So, is Kris the real Santa Claus? Well, really, who are we to argue? Do we really need to know in order to believe? In the words of Kris Kringle himself, you know, Christmas just isn't just a day. It is a frame of mind. And I couldn't agree more. What an absolutely lovely sentiment. So, that brings me to the end of this episode. Thank you very much for watching. I do hope you've enjoyed it. If you have, please leave a like. Please do hit that subscribe button for more movie reviews, trailer reactions, and other movie-related content. We've absolutely loved having you here at SciFirst MovieTalk. We would definitely love to have you back. But most of all, thank you very much for joining us. And goodbye.